James Miller had lived in Oakwood Heights for 7 years, a suburban paradise where the houses stood like sentinels of middle-class achievement. His corner lot, featuring a driveway that curved gracefully toward his colonial-style home, was his sanctuary after long days as an IT project manager. James had transformed the property meticulously, Japanese maples strategically placed for privacy, a koi pond that neighborhood children loved to visit, and garden beds that exploded with color from spring through fall. The Oakwood Heights HOA had always been reasonable under the leadership of retired Judge Harold Benson. Monthly dues of $175 covered community landscaping, pool maintenance, and the occasional block party. Residents followed the rules without much fuss: neutral exterior paint colors, trash cans hidden from street view, and Christmas decorations removed by January 15th. Everything changed when Harold suffered a minor stroke and stepped down. In the emergency election that followed, Diane Whitfield ran unopposed. A former corporate event planner with newly empty nest syndrome, Diane approached HOA leadership with the same intensity she once reserved for Fortune 500 product launches. Within weeks, residents began referring to her as Karen after she instituted mandatory seasonal wreath requirements and began photographing alleged violations from her silver Mercedes that crawled through the neighborhood at dawn. James had managed to stay on Diane's good side, partly through luck and partly through strategic compliments about her immaculate lawn ornaments. Still, he noticed how she lingered when driving past his property, her eyes calculating something he couldn't quite decipher. On a crisp Tuesday in September, James returned from work to find his mailbox containing the usual suspects: bills, advertisements, and a single cream-colored envelope that stood out among the clutter. The heavy cardstock felt expensive between his fingers. Inside was an invitation adorned with silver embossing and dried lavender. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Whitfield request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter Emma Louise Whitfield to Jackson William Pierce on Saturday, October 15th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. James stared at the invitation in bewilderment. He had met Emma exactly twice, once when she was home from college during a neighborhood potluck, and again last Christmas when she had accidentally received one of his Amazon packages. Their interactions had been pleasant but fleeting, certainly not wedding invitation worthy. The following evening, while taking out his recycling, James spotted Tom Harrington, a retired history professor from 3 doors down. "Hey, Tom, did you get an invitation to the Whitfield wedding?" Tom's bushy eyebrows furrowed. "No, and I've known Emma since she was in diapers." Rebecca across the street didn't get one either. Come to think of it, Tom trailed off, mentally mapping the neighborhood. The only folks who got invitations seemed to be those who live along Cedar Lane and Oakwood Circle. James's home sat precisely at the intersection of those 2 streets. "That's odd," James replied. "Do you think there's some sort of capacity issue?" Tom's expression darkened. "No, the Whitfields could rent the country club if they wanted. Diane's up to something. She always is." Later that week, James noticed survey stakes with pink ribbons appearing along both streets and workers measuring distances between driveways. When he casually asked one of them what they were doing, the young man cheerfully responded, "Wedding preparations. Mrs. Whitfield says it's going to be the event of the year." 18 days before the wedding, James's doorbell rang just as he was settling in with a bowl of pasta and the new season of his favorite show. Through the peephole, he saw Diane, dressed in a tailored blazer and holding what appeared to be a professional binder. "James, darling," she exclaimed when he opened the door, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of someone who had taken multiple charm courses. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Before he could respond, she had already stepped into his foyer, her heels clicking authoritatively on the hardwood. "I wanted to personally discuss Emma's wedding with you," she said, opening the leather-bound binder labeled Emma's Perfect Day in gold calligraphy. "As you know, October weddings are absolutely divine in Oakwood Heights." James nodded politely, wondering where this was headed. Emma has always dreamed of a processional entrance that feels like something from a fairy tale. Diane continued, flipping to a page featuring a Pinterest collage of wedding parties walking down tree-lined streets. "We've mapped the entire route. The bridesmaids will begin at the Hendersons' property, the groomsmen at the Paddles, and Emma, my precious Emma, will make her grand entrance right here." She pointed to an aerial photo of James's driveway, now annotated with photoshopped images of a bridal party, complete with flower girls and string quartet. "Your driveway is the perfect staging area," Diane explained, her voice rising with excitement. "The elevation, the southern exposure, the way it aligns perfectly with our front walkway. It's as if it was designed for this moment." James stared at the elaborate plans, speechless as Diane continued unfolding her vision. "We'll need full access from 7 a.m. for setup. The florist will create an archway at the base of your driveway, and we'll have white carpet runners installed. The string quartet will set up near your Japanese maple. The acoustics there are simply perfect. Of course, we'll need you to relocate your vehicles and ensure no one uses the driveway until after the reception concludes around 7 p.m. She handed him a detailed schedule, printed on the same heavy cardstock as the invitation. "Diane, this is," James began. "I know, it's an honor," she interrupted, patting his arm. "And between us, I've been very understanding about those garden gnomes of yours. Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA Guidelines clearly states no whimsical lawn decorations exceeding 12 inches in height. Your tallest gnome must be at least 15 inches. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened slightly. "I've always felt that good neighbors support each other in times of significance. Don't you agree?" James took a deep breath, mentally counting to 10, a technique his therapist had suggested for dealing with difficult people. "Diane, I appreciate you thinking of me, but October 15th is actually when my brother and his family are visiting from Seattle. We've had these plans for months." Diane's smile flickered like a faulty light bulb. "Surely they can adjust their schedule. This is Emma's wedding day. It only happens once." She paused, then added with a honeyed tone, "Well, hopefully only once." "I'm sorry, but they've already purchased non-refundable tickets," James explained. "However, I'm happy to move our cars to the street for the day. You can still use part of the driveway for your procession, but I'll need access to my garage and at least one parking spot for my brother's rental car." Diane's transformation was immediate and dramatic. The charming neighbor vanished, replaced by the true form of Karen that the neighborhood had come to fear. "That is completely unacceptable," she snapped, slamming her binder closed. "Any vehicles would ruin the aesthetic we're creating. Emma has been planning this wedding for 18 months. Do you have any idea what wedding photographers charge these days? I will not have your brother's rental car photobombing my daughter's once-in-a-lifetime memories." James stood his ground. "I'm sorry, but this is my property, Diane. I'm offering a reasonable compromise." "We'll see about that," she hissed, gathering her materials. "Perhaps you've forgotten that the HOA board reviews variance requests for home renovations next week. I believe you submitted plans for a covered patio." Without waiting for a response, she marched toward the door, heels striking his floor like angry exclamation points. Some people in this neighborhood clearly don't understand community spirit. The HOA exists for a reason, James. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from the Oakwood Heights HOA. Inside was a violation notice citing James for 3 garden gnomes exceeding height restrictions, unapproved landscape lighting installed along his back garden path, a bird feeder that was attracting nuisance wildlife. Each violation carried a $75 fine, with an additional $25 per day if not remedied within 72 hours. The following Saturday, James was pruning his hedges when he noticed Diane walking slowly along the street with a wedding planner and photographer. They stopped directly in front of his property, pointing and making sweeping gestures toward his driveway. The wedding planner took extensive notes while the photographer framed shots with his hands, nodding enthusiastically at whatever Diane was saying. That evening, James's phone pinged with a neighborhood watch app notification. Just a friendly reminder from your HOA president. All residents on Cedar Lane and Oakwood Circle are asked to park their vehicles in garages or on side streets on October 15th to accommodate the Whitfield Pierce wedding procession. Your cooperation is mandatory appreciated. Several neighbors immediately commented, "Is this an official HOA rule? I don't remember voting on this. We have family visiting that weekend too. Since when does the HOA regulate where we park on public streets?" Within minutes, the comments were deleted and posting privileges for the group were restricted to administrators only. James received 3 separate calls that evening from neighbors who had been approached about the wedding. The Paddles had been told their driveway would host the groomsmen. The Hendersons were informed their front yard would be the bridesmaids' gathering point. Neither family had agreed, but both feared Diane's retribution. "She's inspecting my property every day now," Mrs. Henderson whispered over the phone. "Yesterday she claimed my hydrangeas violated some obscure height restriction. These bushes have been here for 12 years. 2 days before the wedding, James returned home from work to find 4 men in matching polo shirts constructing an elaborate floral archway at the end of his driveway. A white carpet runner had already been partially unrolled, extending from the street up his driveway. "Excuse me," James called out, rushing from his car. "What are you doing on my property?" The foreman, a burly man with a clipboard, looked confused. "Setting up for the Whitfield wedding, sir. It's all in the work order." He showed James a detailed diagram of his property with installation instructions. "I never authorized this," James stated firmly. "You need to remove everything immediately." "But Mrs. Whitfield assured us." "Mrs. Whitfield doesn't own this property," James interrupted. "I do. And I'm telling you this installation wasn't approved." After a heated phone call between the foreman and Diane, during which James could hear her shrieking through the phone, the workers reluctantly dismantled their progress. James helped them carry the archway to Diane's front lawn, where he left it with a handwritten note. "I decline the use of my property for your event. Please respect my decision. James Miller." That night, someone scattered roofing nails across his driveway. Fortunately, James spotted them before driving over them the next morning. James woke at 6:30 a.m. on the day of the wedding to the sound of voices outside his bedroom window. Still in his pajamas, he peered through the blinds to see an astonishing sight. His driveway had been transformed overnight. A runner of white carpet now stretched from the street to his garage door. Rose petals in varying shades of pink and white had been artfully scattered along both sides. Battery-operated lanterns with flickering LED flames lined the edges. At the base of his driveway stood a newly reconstructed floral archway, even more elaborate than the one he had removed. A hand-lettered sign hammered into his lawn read "Wedding Party Only Beyond This Point." Most alarmingly, a team of people in matching polo shirts similar to those worn by the installation crew were arranging chairs along one side of his driveway. A woman with a clipboard, presumably the wedding planner, was directing a photographer on optimal angles while a florist attached additional arrangements to the archway. James threw on clothes and rushed outside. "What is going on here?" he demanded, addressing the planner. "I explicitly declined the use of my property." The woman looked startled, then composed herself with practiced professionalism. "Mr. Miller, I presume. Mrs. Whitfield assured us this was all arranged. She said you had a last-minute change of heart and gave full permission yesterday." "That is absolutely false," James stated, his voice rising. "I need everyone off my property right now." The commotion attracted attention. Across the street, Diane emerged from her house in a silk bathrobe, her hair in rollers. She strode across the street with remarkable speed for someone in slippers. "James, what are you doing?" she hissed, attempting to pull him aside. "Everything is ready. The wedding party will be here in less than 2 hours." "I told you no, Diane. Multiple times. This is trespassing." Diane's eyes narrowed as she shifted tactics. Standing taller, she projected her voice so the growing number of onlookers could hear. "We all make sacrifices for our community, James. This is one day for a beautiful young couple starting their life together. What kind of person ruins a wedding out of pure selfishness?" Several wedding vendors looked uncomfortable. A few neighbors had gathered on their lawns, watching the drama unfold. James noticed Tom giving him a subtle thumbs up from his driveway. "The kind of person who expects his private property to remain private," James replied evenly. I offered a compromise. You rejected it. I am the president of this homeowners association. Diane was nearly shouting now. This event has been approved by the board. Show me the minutes of that meeting, James challenged, knowing no such meeting had occurred. Diane's face flushed crimson. She stepped closer, dropping her voice to a venomous whisper. If you ruin Emma's day, I will make your life in this neighborhood a living hell. By the time I'm finished, you'll wish you'd never bought this house. Looking over Diane's shoulder, James could see a luxury SUV pulling up. A young woman in a bathrobe, presumably Emma, stared wide-eyed at the confrontation, her makeup artist frozen beside her with a brush in hand. Diane turned, spotted her daughter, and immediately switched to a bright, artificial voice. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just finalizing some details with James. Go back and finish getting ready. Turning back to James, her expression hardened once more. Be reasonable. Go inside your house and stay there until this is over. I'll make sure the violation notices from last week disappear. James looked around at his transformed property, at the vendors uncomfortably continuing their work, at neighbors watching from a distance, too intimidated by Diane to intervene. He realized reasoning was futile. You have 30 minutes to remove everything, he stated, then turned and walked back toward his house. He's agreed, Diane announced loudly to everyone. Crisis averted. Continue working, everyone. The wedding eventually proceeded, though not as Diane had envisioned. The soaked wedding party regrouped in her backyard, entering through the side gate rather than processing down James's driveway. The once immaculate decorations had been hastily relocated, many still dripping. Guests murmured among themselves, documentation of the chaos already circulating on social media. James and Mark watched from James's back porch as the ceremony carried on, now without musical accompaniment since the string quartet's instruments had been water damaged. I can't believe you actually did that, Mark laughed, clinking his beer bottle against James's. Mom would be proud. Mom taught us to stand up to bullies, James replied, even when they're HOA presidents. The following Tuesday evening, James returned home to find an envelope containing a notice for an emergency HOA meeting scheduled for Friday night. The agenda listed one item: discussion of property damage and disruptive behavior at 347 Oakwood Circle. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. By Friday, the community center was packed with residents, many of whom had never attended an HOA meeting before. Diane sat at the front table, flanked by two board members who looked uncomfortable with the unprecedented turnout. We're here to discuss the disgraceful behavior exhibited by James Miller during my daughter's wedding, Diane began without preamble. His actions resulted in property damage, personal injury, and emotional distress. I move that he be fined the maximum penalty of $5,000 and that a lien be placed on his property until payment is received. A murmur rippled through the crowd. One of the board members cleared his throat nervously. Before we vote, would anyone like to comment on this matter? To Diane's visible shock, nearly every hand in the room shot up. Tom Harrington spoke first. I've lived in Oakwood Heights for 23 years. I've never seen an HOA president abuse their position like Diane has. She tried to commandeer private property for a personal event, then retaliated with frivolous violation notices when the homeowner refused. Mrs. Paddle stood next. She told the vendors they could use our driveway too, without ever asking us. When my husband objected, she threatened to cite us for our excessive garden vegetables that supposedly violated some landscaping rule. One by one, neighbors recounted similar experiences, retaliatory violation notices, intimidation tactics, arbitrary rule enforcement, and deleted comments on the community app. The Henderson family presented printed screenshots of messages from Diane admitting she had never consulted the board about the wedding plans. The former HOA treasurer revealed that Diane had attempted to use association funds to pay for wedding-related street cleaning. By the time the testimonials concluded, Diane sat rigid in her chair, her face ashen. The board member called for a vote on her motion regarding James. It was defeated 73-1. A new motion was immediately proposed. to hold a recall election for the position of HOA president. It passed 72-1, with one abstention. 2 weeks later, Harold Benson's daughter announced that her father had recovered sufficiently to serve as interim HOA president until formal elections could be held. His first official act was to dismiss all violation notices issued during Diane's tenure pending review. The Whitfields put their house on the market the following month. By spring, James's legendary barbecues had resumed. At the first one of the season, neighbors toasted him with raised glasses, as Mark's death metal playlist served as background music, played at a much more reasonable volume. Mrs. Henderson brought commemorative garden gnomes for everyone, each one exactly 16 inches tall, a pointed violation of the now abandoned whimsical lawn decoration restriction. James's favorite moment came when Emma Whitfield Pierce unexpectedly appeared at his door one afternoon. "I wanted to apologize," she said, looking genuinely remorseful. "I had no idea my mother was forcing you to host my wedding. The whole thing was her idea. I would have been happy with the country club. Anyway, I thought you might want this." She handed him a wedding album. Inside was a professional photo that had captured the exact moment the sprinklers activated. Bridesmaids in mid-scream, groomsmen diving for cover, and Diane front and center, her face a portrait of absolute horror as water droplets suspended in air around her caught the sunlight. "The photographer quit right after taking this," Emma explained. "Said he'd never worked in such conditions. But I think it's the best picture of the whole day. It's certainly the most honest." James had the photo framed. It now hangs in his hallway, a reminder that sometimes standing your ground, with a strategic assist from death metal and well-aimed sprinklers, can restore balance to even the most dysfunctional HOA community.